I'm very appreciative that you took time from your busy schedule to join us today. Could you give us a bit of a background? What is it that you're involved in at the European Parliament level?
I'm an economist by training, and my work in the European Parliament focuses on financial economic issues. One of the issues I've been heavily involved in, not just in the European Parliament, but also in national parliament, is the fight against tax avoidance, where you see that the big corporates and also the big polluters pay less and less taxes, and to change that, that's been a fight I've been fighting for many years, but in national parliament, also in European Parliament. But I also working on data protection and privacy.
What is it that intrigued you about this particular project?
What I liked is, just like you are in, we are 2,000 kilometers apart. So what I like, it's a project that is done in different parts of Europe, and it involves young people to make them think about the dilemmas they may see, or at that age may not see yet. So that's what I find interesting. So what for many people is sort of accepted, the idea of liberty is not always available, so to say, and that you make young people think about it and express themselves about it. I like very much, and I'm in a luxury position in a sense of a politician. I'm dealing more often with these issues, but that you take young people to think about it is good. Also, because it comes to the point, you may not accept it as individual. What are you going to do? Because you need to change. You want to change how you're going to bring about action. How do you find a collective of individuals that fight the same fight? But it starts with awareness.
Awareness about what exactly?
Awareness about that liberty is not the same for everyone, so that there are restrictions imposed on people, which I think people at young age take sometimes for granted. We accept difference as children. You accept the world as it is, right? But as later on in your life, you start to realize that these differences are not natural, are not given, that you can change it. So, but first you have to become aware of all the differences, and then find a way to become active in, let's say, society and community, to change what you don't want to accept.
Right. Yes, I completely agree, and I'm really glad that we're sharing this opinion. I'm curious to hear more. So, Act for Liberty is based on the understanding that we've lived in freedom for 75 years now. Yet, what does it really mean? How do we define freedom, and what does lack of freedom look like? At Masterpiece, we always say that peace is not the absence of war, but it's the presence of certain values, of democracy, of freedom of opinion, of equality, of privacy. I was wondering if in your work you think about these questions too. In particular, what is peace and what is the absence of peace for you?
Yeah, if you ask a question like this, the absence of peace is more specific, more easy to imagine than peace itself, right? Because the absence of peace, we see examples, and it's not just related to violence or suppression. When you go nowadays to social media, I sometimes don't find the situation of peace that I see a lot of people sort of screaming at each other, reasserting their identity at the expense of others. I wouldn't say that is peace. So what we're looking for, peace is a way of living together. Maybe that's the way, but that's for me very much related to the concept of liberty. Freedom is sometimes defined as the absence of restrictions, which is a negative definition, but you also have the positive definition, and the freedom is the capacity to to make your life, but to make your life you need other people to live with, because you don't live on your own. And this is the hard part, in a sense. So in my political career, you can't work on every issue there is in society. So I picked issues where I think the situation is unfair and you need others to change the situation. And that is, for me, enabling people and society to reach new opportunities that were not before, where you need each other to reach these opportunities. And this is where you strive for a situation of you could say, peace. The point is, of course, that we're not going to make that situation ever, right? We're not going to live in a world where we will have absolute peace. That's our freedom in that sense. The point is that's not the point. The point is that you have this purpose in your life, and that you strive for it, and that you find others with the same purpose. And knowing that once you've done that, once you contribute to that, and you are no longer able to contribute to that, there will others will come and follow you and try to do the same thing. So for me, it's also, so peace is not about it. And come to think of it, peace is not a situation. It's more an ideal, and it's something you strive for. Not in the expectation that you will reach it, but it's the way you want to the world to be changed. Now, I can say that as a politician, right? Because I've been, what is interesting that for young people have to find that out.
Yeah.
Because you can become very cynical. You see all the problems in the world. You can read the newspaper. You can watch television. You can become cynical. Don't become cynical. Choose your purpose. Find people to share this purpose with, and go on this journey. Not in the expectation that you will reach the destination, but the journey itself, because you will start the journey and others will follow, even when you, let's say, when you're gone.
So yes, I really appreciate what you're saying about taking action. Act for Liberty project, it's all about bringing the conversation to the individual and to young people to make these topics tangible. It's very complex, it's broad, it's very abstract, talking about liberty or the lack of liberty. What is your opinion about this? How to bring such big and complex dilemmas down to daily life? How can we engage young people more in these discussions? How can we reduce that sense of apathy and negativity, or what you were just saying earlier?
No, but it starts with awareness, right? And this is exactly what the project does. And what I very much like, that there is the thought of action, because you use the metaphor of the boiling frog. The boiling frog needs to jump out, right? And that's the action. Now, in a sense, I struggle with the same issues. We want to involve young people into politics. How to do that? First, they have to become aware. And then second, they need to be ready to go into action. Well, what action can they do? So that's part of the problem for political parties, how to engage the young people, how to make them, once they are no longer, let's say, cynical, how can we contribute to political action? So that's, for me, so that's very simple. But it starts with awareness and then giving possibilities for actions. That's the simple scheme I have in my head. And now, being engaged in a political party is one of the options. I think there are many options. I always explain this to people, not just to the young people. If you join the local football club and help them as a volunteer, for me, that's political action, because you don't accept the world as it is. You try to contribute to it because you want this football club to be nice, sportive, and so on. So you help. And that is what I try to convince people, that they don't, they should try to take responsibility, and they can do this in many, many ways. Because otherwise it becomes a very elite thing. If you want to say politics is not for everyone, right? No matter, you can vote, but how to, so I'm looking to democratize political action so that they can participate in the way that they can best participate. But that's a sort of, in all fairness, a search for also for political parties, or at least for me personally.
Yes, right. So what we try to do with Act for Liberty is to allow young people to become aware, indeed, that when you're surrounded by certain dilemmas or challenges, you might not even know until you come to a point where, okay, here is the borderline, here is the boiling point where I feel that I need to step out, I need to take action,
Yeah.
get engaged with either that football club or maybe the city municipality. I need to go out there and tell people that this is not okay for me.
Yeah.
When you were playing the game, did you get that sense of boiling point? Did it work out for you, the principle that you're looking at different circumstances, you'd be able to evaluate yourself, is it okay for me or not? Is that a way to engage young people, perhaps?
It's a way to make them aware and to think about action, right? What I also see in the situation that, like I say, young people, they become cynical because they don't know what to do. It's a bit like, I remember watching the movie by Al Gore quite some time ago. It's called Inconvenient Truth.
Yeah.
And at the end of the movie, you are really depressed by all the problems that climate change brings, the temperatures rising, the sea levels rising. But it also depresses you in the sense that you don't know what to do. So you need to give people, and also young people, possibilities to act. So from awareness should follow action, because otherwise, and this is what you see often in our society, that people don't know what to do about it. They don't trust politics sometimes, but that leaves other opportunities for change very limited. So what can I do about Facebook? Yeah, of course, all these football players get millions. That's how it is. It's like it becomes given, not to be changed. And this is what you see, the cynicism in our society. And of course, that's why I want to engage people, and especially young people, say, you can take part in discussions and you can find actions, not even within political parties, but also outside.
Exactly. At Masterpiece, we believe a lot in the power of art, of music and dance as a way to create awareness and to mobilize young people. That would be a tool, a way to get more and more young people involved. That's why we included the posters as a part of the Act for Liberty project. What sparked in your mind when you were looking at all these posters?
I saw a sheer variety of posters, and this is what I love. People think of things that I would not have thought of, and that's the power of the collective, by the way. The more people, the more possibilities arise, and I can't, as an individual, think of all these opportunities. And I like to be surprised, so to say. So I saw this poster of, I'm not sure what it was, literally, but something like "Long live Google Translate." Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you're right. That's talking about liberty. Google Translate helps us to cross bridges that were more difficult before. We now communicate in English. That's the way. But hey, not everyone speaks English, or not everyone. You cannot all read all the website in Google Translate. Helps enormously by to cross the cultural bridges. I hadn't looked at Google Translate that way, so I like that.
Right, it's all about these new perspectives and looking at
exactly
solutions from a different angle. Migration, let's go deeper into any of the topics. There was a quote, and that was popping up in a manifesto, that young people don't find it okay if refugees are obliged to give up their nationality. In fact, they should be able to keep it. Do you have an opinion on that? Or is there any other topic related to migration in particular that's important right now to you in your work at the European Parliament level?
Well, one of the discussions we have in the European Parliament, and which is sometimes frustrating, are still the refugees and the children of refugees trapped in at Lesbos. And also still the Syrian refugees in Turkey in sometimes very difficult circumstances. Because I remember I saw also this discussion, what people find very difficult is to accept that you are illegal. So the question is, will I move there well, what I find very difficult, if they would move there, if they would there be illegal. Because illegal would mean not only you have limited options, but that you are a second-rate citizen. That's what it says. That's what people find very difficult, and which where I can relate to. So, but one of the issues in Europe is, of course, that we see the migration flows from Africa, from Syria, and we don't have a very good humane answer to it. And the frustrating part is that there are still refugees trapped in Moria and Karatepe and Lesbos. I visited Moria, I think, in just after the deal with Turkey was finalized or just came into play. And even at that stage, the refugee camp was already too small. And ever since, the number of refugees has grown. And we let this continue. And we can't find a political way to our great deception to convince member states to take more refugees and take them out of this dreadful situation.
So what do you think could be a solution?
I don't think there are quick solutions, in all honesty, because I wish I could say, I could take the moral high ground and say, yeah, of course there is a solution, but the political reality is much more complex. But in a sense, there is a solution, and I will advocate that. Still, I think we should simply accept more refugees. There's no alternative. You can't let this continue. Then again, I know that I will not convince everyone. That's for sure. So it's a minority that thinks it. We're not alone in saying that. But we need to find ways to convince others that this situation cannot continue.
Yes, and certainly young people can play a role here with showing the example, with engaging and helping out the communities that are arriving in their villages.
Yeah.
Okay, another topic that engaged young people a lot or created passion was equality, which of course relates to what we were just talking about. Gender equality is something that came out as really important to everyone. What is your stance? Looking at the European level, how far are we from real meaningful equality between men and women?
That was interesting because that made me realize something. Of course, I think my generation, when I grew up, we were sort of assumed that men and women were equal, and later on we learned in our working life that we were not equal in our choices. I think the men were a bit more focused on their career than the women to start with, but also we learned that there is still this inequality, and I'm glad to see that even the younger generations won't accept these differences, right? So this is good. We don't want to have this gender inequality. What I find interesting is that I also, when I looked at the question, I think, okay, this is time for me to jump out of the boiling water. But I also realized that the water is cooling down. Because if you look at that from the longer run, I see the position of women improve. If you look at participation in education, okay, I have two boys, and they are let's say the weak types for the future, so to say. They are because female participation in education is much higher than of boys, and in fact the results are better. So I expect to change further. At the same time, it doesn't go fast enough. If you look at the diversity of boards of big corporates, it's still male dominated. So we have a lot to change, and we still see the wage differences between men and women. So it's unacceptable. But I also realized that sometimes, like where I started, it's if you want this to change, you keep on fighting to change it, but don't be pessimistic. You see the change, so it's within reach. It may not be quick enough to our liking, but hey, keep on pushing, keep on changing. It will change.
Yes, yeah, true. I completely agree. It takes a little time, But we cannot afford to become too pessimistic and not observe how far we are already compared to a few decades back. Just very briefly, freedom of opinion. Are we allowed to post everything that we want? Can we criticize government policies, for example? What do you think about that?
Freedom of speech is essential in our society, and essentially societies are made up of minorities, and they need to be protected. And protection of freedom of speech is therefore essential. People, for the way they live, they need to be able to speak out as they want to. So that's an essential, a fundamental right in our democracy. Doesn't mean that's something else that you have to say everything what comes to your mind. I think you can be polite. You don't want to be rude. And I will speak out against people that do so. I think on social media, I think we touched upon that before. People are way too hard in a sense. I don't like it. I will speak out against it. Then again, they are allowed to do it. And of course, there are limits to the freedom of speech. You're not allowed to engage in hate speech, to discriminate against these minorities that in our society. So there are limits, but in essential, it's a fundamental right in our democracy. So yes, you have every right to criticize a politician. The problem, of course, nowadays is that our media landscape, and that's why media is very important in democracy. You can't have a democracy without media. And what I see is that media is in difficulty, mainly because of the rise of social media, meaning that there's less funding for newspapers and for broadcast companies. You see media disappear at the local level. Which hurts also local democracy. If there's no one to report on what is happening in the local democracy, in fact, the democracy is becoming the poorer of it and may stop to function. But you also see, of course, in countries like, well, let's name him Viktor Orban, where they dominate, where politicians dominate the media. Different example also in Europe is the impact of Vučić in Serbia on the media. And there you see that, like I said, that's essential for democracy. So it's not able to just to speak out, but also to reach people is also very important. And I think the combination of populist politicians in power and the rise of social media has led to concerns about the functioning of our democracy and of the protection of the freedom of speech.
Yeah, I completely agree. You touched upon it briefly already. Social media, it is really an important part of our lives now and bringing about many challenges, namely fake news, for instance. Young people are worried that messages from politicians or about politicians are sometimes manipulated, that we don't know where to find trustworthy information anymore. What is your opinion? How can we get involved in the situation at all?
One of the problems with the social media is that they derive their income from ads. The value of the ads increases when we pay more attention to social media and therefore to the ads. So the big tech will do much to keep our attention and to collect as much data as possible to keep our attention focused on the social media, meaning that it's become commercialized. And in that sense, the problem is that hate speech or arousing videos or whatever sells. That's the problem that we have. So that's one thing I would like to, what I like to change through the European Parliament, that we change the business models of the big tech, because but that's one side. I think we should not commercialize our social media that much. The other is that you need to support much more, let's say, public media, where you can make sure that there's a diversity of opinions in the public media, but also we should not be afraid to provide them with enough funding. If you look at journalists and newspapers, these are not well-paid jobs. These are people that do it because they have a call to be journalists, and I think it's a great profession, but it's also sometimes underpaid. So we make our media is essential to our democracy, is essential to our society, and still we give less and less funding to media that, like I said, are essential, and that this I can't understand. People don't think about democracy, it seems, but democracy is not just about going to the ballot box and bring out your vote. Democracy is about the balance of power, and media is essential. Like freedom of speech is essential to have this balance of power, so that minorities are protected, can speak out. But the media is essential too. So we need to rethink what democracy means. And democracy for me is that you protect minorities, and that you don't have one group dominating the other group. So we always think about balance of powers, making sure that we find a balance. And I think social media is disrupting this balance at this point. Fortunately, there's a discussion. Facebook is sort of under fire, so to say, since they don't do anything about all the expressions by Donald Trump, even though it's not only sometimes bad trace, but indeed sometimes fake news. So this is the interesting discussion that's ongoing. But the underlying problem is the commercial motive behind fake news, hate speech, and all that.
Yes, it's touching upon another topic of Act for Liberty, which is data privacy. Is it okay for Facebook or any other such social media channel to have access to your personal data?
Of course not.
Of course not. That's what we found with Act for Liberty as well. What is something that the European Parliament is aiming to do? Of course.
Yeah, this is. I'm in the middle of let's say of a political debate in the European Parliament, which is in the run-up to legislation, and I propose a ban on personalized behavioral advertisement, because this breaks into the business model of the big tech. And this is the reason they want to know as much as possible from us, because they can sell ads. So there are two big tech companies that are mainly focused on ads, Google and Facebook. That's the main income. It's very different from Apple, who sells phone. It's different from Microsoft, who sells Windows and hardware. No, these companies just sell ads, and this is why they want to know everything about us. This is dangerous. And exactly this is what I try to do in the European Parliament. It will be an uphill battle, no doubt, because you need to convince a lot of people to understand. They need to be aware, they need to come into action. You have to fight the lobby of Google and Facebook, but hey, this is what I will try.
I have to say, it turned out that 37% of young people were okay with companies storing all of our data.
I know, I saw.
A lot of young people, or old people for that matter, would say, well, my data is not that interesting anyway. I'm not doing against the law, you know, I don't mind. Take my data. I'm not bothered. What is your opinion?
Yeah, I think this shows that you need to raise awareness. It also shows, of course, that young people are very accustomed, very used to the social media and all the new technologies. Long live Google Translate, and they're right in that sense. It's like we can Zoom now. It's wonderful technology. But Zoom, for example, stores all the data, even without you asking, so they can analyze faces. Well, that's a scary thought here. So if your face, so you may wander around with Paris, and you may be noticed because there's this system of technology, there's the technology of facial recognition. It may start with a Zoom meeting, and you may end up being recognized in Paris. Do you want to be followed around? I don't think so. So again, technology can be a wonderful thing. Technology can be a frightening thing. It's that sense. That's an old age discussion, I think, but we need to make sure that the technology works for us.
So Paul, after discussing all these different topics, after playing the game and looking at the posters, what is it, the topic that struck you the most? And what is your takeaway message? Or what is your act? How will you follow up on all of this information?
What I find striking is that this is a project that has been done in several parts of Europe, and that we have similar concerns throughout Europe. So this is something to keep in mind. And what I very much like about the project is that it raises awareness on the issues that maybe young people are not aware about. They find it self-evident or not for to be changed. That makes them aware and it makes them discuss. And I think that's a great tool because this is part of the political social education of young people. And that's and that starts with awareness. Awareness that it should indeed lead to action. So it's not just by my action, but it's also about making other people act. This is what the project is about, because there's a sheer variety of topics, because it goes to migration, democracy, the use of data. And what I find is the fact that there is all these issues on the table could frighten someone, could make someone freeze. Okay, what do I gonna do? So my message always is to people, just pick one of them that you really are engaged in, and take this issue and try to bring this forward, make it the purpose of what you do. And in that sense, I'm happy to see that now you have included, because that's sort of supported choice I made recently, or in recent years, to look much more in the collection of data, like I said, for commercial motives, which invades our privacy, which starts to follow us, which starts to analyze us, which starts makes decisions for us. And I think, and I love the technology myself. I'm not a geek, so to say, but I love these gadgets and all new possibilities. But it sometimes also frightens me, because it really upsets our society in a way that we cannot foresee. Because I think there's also a huge potential in using data, analyzing data. It will change our life, but we have to make sure that this technology works for us, and that we, as people, as society, have a say in the direction that the technology takes. And my concern at this stage is that we see a very, in America and in the United States, corporate controlled data and data analysis algorithms. That's the big tech. Or we see state controlled data and data analysis in China. And I'm very much looking for a European way to, it's not commercial, but it's not political, but for people to work with the data and all the possibilities that it gives. So this is, and that's fine. I find encouraging that also young people, they are not aware enough. They should be aware that they give away their data. So that's what I take from this. Then again, they are aware there are issues coming up, and this I find it in that sense encouraging that it is an issue, but I also am aware that they need to become more aware of the problems that we have. So the new technology is wonderful, but don't take it for granted that it's always going to be good.
Right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. It's been very interesting. Genuinely.
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting to discuss this. I really liked the project, and to see all the answers, the boiling frogs and the posters. And so thank you for all the work.